Hello everyone, this is Tim, and this is going to be a recap of the 14th session of the Lamentations of the Flame Princess campaign. And I'm just going to jump right into it. The group was trapped in the sarcophagus room that they had entered recently. Behind them, a horde of dragging feet sounds and murmuring could be heard. They seemed to be trapped. Rayhan found a hidden compartment under the body, and Ash the elf tried to break through it, thinking that it was perhaps an escape route, and in the process managed to smash a bunch of the crystalline and glass objects that were under there. There were 2 vials of this chartreuse potion, and there was other potions that were smashed and leaked all over the place. So picture a bunch of glass, in this liquid. They found a half statue that had this girl who was sort of clenching on to a woman that wasn't there anymore. They found a complete necklace that later turned out to be some sort of spell-storing magical item, though they weren't really sure what spells were held in it. Each gem appeared to spin and lock into place as a way to unleash the spell, and 7 of the gems were sparkling out of the 15 that were on the necklace, but they have no way of knowing what those spells are that are trapped in those gems. They closed the door, which had this blown-out hole in the center of it from a trap that had previously gone off. It seemed to lock in place, and they sort of heard this electric buzz as if the trap was being reset. They were a little worried about the hole in the door, especially with these sort of noises coming towards them. Ronald Monaghan, who was one of the NPCs that had traveled with him, and a thief, and this old man, who never gave them his name, were trapped in there with Mallow the cleric, Ash the elf, Rayhan the specialist, and Ramelzy the magic user. From the hallway and the light of the old man's lantern that he was holding up, this horrible skinned mob of humans ages toddler to 40 years of age were lurching towards them. More of them kept coming down the hallway, and at first they thought, oh yeah, we can handle this. And then they realized that all of those creatures that might have been human, they're not really sure, from that other room with the dragon turtle were all coming. So that whole army, or a good portion of them, were between them and freedom. So they started to feel a little bit desperate. They were packed in there in the hallway and sort of moved down as a giant sardine smashed together mob. No way out. What would they do to get out? That was the question that was on my mind. I had no idea. Mallow had dumped out all of the ashes in front of him, and this was me role-playing Keith Hershey Jr.'s character, because he wasn't there that session. He dumped out the ashes in front of him and then blew out this cloud of it. He began to pray and seemed to be despairing that they would never make it out of here alive. He took off his shirt and started whipping his back with the cat of 9 tails. He said that they should start to ration their food and drinks, and everyone else, I think at that comment, started to realize this is probably more bad than they realized it was at first. If you're starting to think about rationing food, that's not a good thing. Ramelzy let loose one of his lightning bolts, and as he did, he nearly killed most of everything that was in the hallway. Just a big long stream of electric burned and dying bodies. And then he just basically realized that these were actually people, that they were just horribly raised and mistreated, and part of them, I think, snapped when he did that. So after he burned out all these things, they thought, okay, we can get out now, but just that more kept coming. It was like Ulysses S. Grant was the general, just throwing people in the meat grinder to win the day. So the horde of flesh just kept coming. They fired into them, hacked their limbs to bloody wreckage, and still they kept coming. There was no way out. They tried to find another way out of the room. They checked for traps and secret passages, and this was the section of the campaign where if I was a different GM, perhaps I would have given them, okay, I'm just going to put an exit route in here just to keep the story moving, but I stuck to my guns. It's like, this dungeon is designed this way. I'm going to leave it like that and see what comes out. The possibility of a total party kill was here. So, again, they were stuck. Ramelzy convinced Mallow the cleric that he should aid them. And he cast whatever spells he knew at the time, but they were only temporary, like blessings and heroism, things like that. And it wasn't the magic key to get them out of here. Ash the elf mumbled to himself while fumbling with his necklace, and purple energy flew out of his head and into Ramelzi's head. And he sort of gave of himself. There were some elven memories and memories from his past lives that, briefly got glimpsed by Ramelzi. And this is sort of like the feat things that I give out in the game, depending on how people play their characters. And, I got that sort of idea from Aaron in his past campaigns. He used to do that. So this is when the group also started to realize that all of these things that they were fighting, these skinless freaks, these skinless mutants, or whatever they were, was a result of 40 years of childbearing in the town done by this midwife, that she had offered them to the outer powers, that she had skinned them, that their lost spirits and souls were wandering down here in the sewers underneath the town of Pembrooktonshire. And that idea sort of creeped them out. Let's see here. So after 4 hours of combat, violence wasn't the solution. They could not hack their way out of this thing. And that, even the angelic sword didn't light up because there was no children of demons that were there. During this time, Ramelzi cursed the sword and threw it against the wall, basically saying that his mother would not help him since his mother's spirit is supposedly still trapped in the sword. The group then pushed the stone sarcophagus lid and the base against the door to keep these arms that were reaching out through the hole, swiping at them, just to keep them at bay, because they were making some progress of breaking the door, the wooden door, bit by bit, splinter by splinter. So they slid this huge sarcophagus in front of the door to keep them out. And in the process, they managed to talk to this disembodied kid voice, the spirit, named Stella. And Stella was the daughter of the plumber. And they had never talked to this plumber, but they heard rumors of him that there was something under the town. So instead of talking to the plumber first, they just went under the town. So, that's kind of funny too. But that's what they did. So they talked to her, and Rayhan convinced her that, she should go and unleash that stone trap that had them sealed if they ever did get out of here. And they also learned that he of the lake was very angry, and that he was, spouting flames against the wall and everything like that, and that all of the skinless ones knew where they were, and she wasn't sure how they were going to get out. So Rayhan started collecting the potion at the bottom of the sarcophagus that had smashed when Ash jumped in it. It was a sort of combined brown color now. And then he poured all the liquid into his water skin, flecked with little shards of glass, which will come into the story later. Let's see here. Mallow the cleric suggested that if they should start peeing into their empty water skins in case they were here long enough they could actually drink it. The rest of the characters basically just said, if you want to drink piss, man, you can go right ahead, but I'm not going to. Ronald the thief NPC began to flip out, swearing and cursing, kicking things. He was yelling about everyone being ineffective and no one could get them out of here. He was yelling at the old man, threatening him, kicking him, throwing him out, holding him against the groping hands that were at the door. Just trying to freak him out so that he would do something. And the rest of the group kind of thought maybe the old man could do something, but he for some reason wasn't. Ronald suggested that maybe he should sacrifice the old man, and I think his quote was, "This old fucker," so that his outer powers might come and let them out. And the group had to sort of convince Ronald not to kill the old man. Ronald held up this bag of rats and told the old man to do something with your damn rats. Ronald kept the knife to his throat, and then he dumped the old man's bag out, and a bunch of books and scrolls fell to the ground. And he's like, "Can't none of this shit help us? Is that what you're saying?" He's just totally flipping out. And it was a lot of fun to roleplay that. I like role-playing characters that just go fucking crazy. The old man threatened Ronald, saying that the outer powers would devour him. That you should treat lightly with those who worship the Dark Ones. Then Ronald stabbed him in the leg just to shut him up. He began to scream. Ramelzi then, looking into the situation, moved forward and, unrolled one of the scrolls, and then this swirling darkness started to go around his head. And in the corner, something to begin to coalesce there, this shadow stuff. The words on the scroll vanished, and the old man's rats ran over to that shadow that was forming and were sort of lying down on the ground. And they all kind of had this oh shit moment, like what did we just unleash in this sealed room that we're trapped in? So they're sort of between a rock and a hard place. Ash began to fire on the old man when he began to laugh, like this maniacal laughter when he was informed that the demon was coming, that they had opened the scroll. He didn't really seem very scared for himself. He made this sort of squeaky noise, and then all the rats ran over to Ronald because the old man had trained them, and they started to bite his arms and his legs, crawl up his pant legs, and then he finally dropped the old man. Rayhan stabbed at the forming demon with the sword that has been damaged. It was melted by the dark altar above, that had the voices of those of the outer dark, and it sort of had this like 50% mischance. It would flicker in and out. He stabbed. He completely missed the demon. This is when the old man started to draw something in his own blood, since he was shot in the stomach with the arrow. Looked like some sort of protection circle or a pentacle, to keep him safe and the demon out. And that's finally when Ash's arrow shot under his throat and killed the old man. Ramalzi noticed what the old man was doing, and then he got the idea to do something like that was larger. He was remembering back to the time spent with his dark masters that tortured him, and he tried to remember one of those symbols and to draw that in blood, the old man's blood. There was that demon was forming. It was like this dark scaly figure covered in ectoplasmic goo. This is when the group ran over to the incomplete circle and were attempting to hide behind the lines of blood so that they wouldn't be disturbed by this demon's visage. The rats around the demon then exploded, splattering their blood and brains all over the walls and floor. And then this is when the head of the demon started to form. It had this mass of tendrils that looked like 20-digit fingers that were all sort of covered in this hairy cilia. It was exuding this slime that was sort of glooping and splatting on the ground. Its face was this goat mixed with like a cow's face, with pus coming from its ears and large red eyes. At the end of each of those tendrils, there seemed to be those tendrils are kind of like fingers made out of hair, I guess. And at the end of those tendrils were these small heads of various people that were just like screaming like that. So, this chorus of screams. And that was when Ramalzi recognized the demon from a book that he had read, Escalagate. Escalagate? I think it's how I pronounce that. So he had heard of the demon before because of his Dark Masters and their books. The act of seeing this demon's eyes caused trauma to Rayhan's brain. He started to bleed out of the ears. And he had this horrible migraine. When the demon was fully formed, it opened its mouths, the one here and all the ones on its head, and the rat parts and blood and brains just flew up into the mouths, and they started crunching and chewing on the bones and just slurping down the blood. And by this time, the magical circle was fully formed so that it no longer affected them. Rayhan then pulled out his water skin, where he collected those potions that were mixed up, with shards of glass, and he gave it over to Ronald and told him that it was alcohol, it would calm his spirits. And I think we did some sort of roll to see, if Ronald thought that was bullshit, but he didn't do very well. So he drank down this glass flecked potion, probably tearing up his insides as he did so. But that wouldn't matter because, worse things happened to him. The ground all around them started to quake, and, blocks of stone were falling from the ceiling. A lot of rumbling was happening. And violet blue swirling circle, like a portal, started to form in the man's stomach. It looked like some sort of gate or portal to another dimension. This swirling gray mist could be seen just inside the portal. And it was turning Ronald inside out, tearing him bit from bit, just spaghettifying him, or, I think that's a term for it. Just basically, he was being inverted and being pulled into the portal. Rayhan then grabbed his water skin right out of his hand, so he had half of the mixed potion left, because he had plans for that later. And then this portal in Ronald's stomach started to expand, and eventually Ronald would be completely enveloped by it. And it was sort of forming on the floor once he fell down. Rayhan then kicked Ronald out of their magic circle towards the demon, thereby keeping the demon away from them, because the demon looked very petrified and scared. It backed away from this portal, and for whatever reason, it did not want to go in there. It knew what awaited it if it would fall into that portal. And the idea of a demon being scared kind of freaked out the players a little bit. This is when Rayhan got cracked in the head with this big stone from above. And Jeremiah said a great quote here. He said, "Unknown life is better than known death." And then he jumped through the portal. he didn't like this idea of this demon here and being trapped in there, with all these skinless freaks trying to get in through the door. And Ronald was no more. The circle was expanding on the floor. The portal was probably about 5 or 6 feet in diameter at this point. And then Ash and Rayhan were left huddled together in this room, in this magical circle, with a demon that was backing away into the corner, but still looking over to them. And for some reason, the demon thought that Rayhan was this sorcerer, an incanter, a summoner. It started to be looking towards him as a voice of responsibility, and he was the one that released him from the scroll, perhaps, even though Ramalzi had. This is when Ash the elf held his shield above their heads, sort of like a rock umbrella, to keep the falling debris from cracking them in the face. And the demon basically said, "Sorcerer, stop this! I will serve you! Stop this!" And then Rayhan told the demon to prove his worth. Why should he stop anything? The demon was very terrified to jump over the portal, but Rayhan sort of pointed to the door, to the sarcophagus, saying, "It proved your worth. What are you going to do about it?" The demon grabbed the sarcophagus and threw it against the wall, shattering into 1,000 pieces. And then it basically just moved through the door and just tore up everything. The fire and electricity trap went off, obliterating some of the skinless ones that were real close to the doorway there. And then basically just waded down the hallway. Rayhan grabbed up some of the old man's books and scrolls. Mallow was calling out to Penthos and Vex. And in response, this humanoid figure just came hurling out of the gate, slamming against the wall. It had scars and cuts all over its body. It was missing bits of its flesh. And then when he lifted his head, it seemed like perhaps this was Ramalzi, who had just jumped into it. And now we're going to switch focus here, going to Ramalzi's point of view. He had hurled himself into the unknown. He was falling through this gray mist, tumbling through the air. Below him, he saw this very dusty place with lots of brown earth. It was covered with torture devices, knives, and torn-up creatures that were in turn torturing and then healing others. And it seemed like the cyclical process of torture and healing. He was grabbed by thousands of small hands and pulled towards the devices. He was paralyzed with fear and disgust. Ramalzi could not move, but he could feel everything that was happening to him. And for years, he was in agony, getting the gifts of pain, suffering, and torment from those who served Penthos and Vex, surprisingly enough. Perhaps the prayers of the cleric had done something. Maybe not something good. But the interesting thing was that with each cut and with each slash of a blade, a memory was removed. Something that Ramalzi had been tortured by, his past. In the end, he felt cleansed and brought back to some sort of primitive, reborn state. There was this disk of light in the gray mist above with thousands of tendrils that led down to the heads of all these torn-up humans that were walking all over the place. And then, at that moment, he was hurled violently back upwards into the gray mist, thanks to Mallow's prayers. He looked over and saw two strangers, once he had entered the room again, that suddenly became familiar to him. He was startled at first, especially when they tried to touch him, since for years, every time someone touched him, they had a blade in their hand. Mallow was trying to tell him something about being blessed by Penthos and Vex, but Ramalzi had no idea what the hell he was talking about. They followed the trail out of this room of the skinless bodies and found their way back to the stairwell that led up to the first level, where they had rolled that light apple down before and met one of the disembodied voices. Ash and Ramalzi decided to go upstairs, and upstairs they found scratch marks where that stone trap had slid, but it was very expertly crafted, so they couldn't really see where it actually was, even though they knew it was there. and they headed up back through the sewers. Rayhan, however, was kind of curious and decided to crawl through these, what I described as hamburger, these torn up bodies, pieces of flesh and blood. He was covered from, his wrists up to his elbows, his legs up to his thighs, as he was crawling through all this, just mountains of human detritus. And he wanted to go see what was going on with the dragon turtle in the cave, because the trail of bodies kept going to that section. So there was the way out or over to the dragon turtle, and he decided to go that way. He finally crept up to the cave entrance and looked inside. The dragon turtle was burning things and fighting against the demon, hurling it left and right. It seemed like these voices of those of the outer dark that were by the stalactites in the sky, the top of the cave, that they were doing things as well. Many of these skinless humans were being slaughtered in droves, and the mouths of the heads dangling from the tendrils of the demon had this sort of energy, dark energy pouring out of them. And the voices were screaming above in the cave. Rayhan used the last of his potion and snuck up through all the bodies and threw it into the lake. And there was some wonder, will potions work that way? I'm not really sure. But it seemed in this case, with whatever was going on, maybe some magical effect in the area, that it did actually work. Maybe the lake was living, who knows. But the ground started to quake. The stalactites were falling down from the ceiling, crushing more of these humans. One of the three voices seemed to get very quiet, or no longer existed. And then Rayhan snuck back, but the demon noticed him. Even though he was stealthy as hell, the demon seemed to have this connection with him. The demon started kicking the bodies out of the way and headed right towards Rayhan. And this is where Rayhan basically asked for one of these disembodied spirits to help close the door behind him, because they could actually move things. In addition to this, Rayhan felt this other presence that was also afraid for him. And he got this sort of burst of strange energy or strength from it, and he really wasn't sure what that was, but perhaps it was the troll that he has these visions. Maybe there was some connection there that helped him. Mallow the priest was shocked and surprised that they had actually escaped, that they were alive. They passed the dark altar, and it was silent and cracked in half. It seemed like it was completely destroyed by whatever actions they had taken. They had passed the altar, and then the demon came right to it. It took the demon some time to catch up to them. But he couldn't pass it. There was some sort of seal there, or mark, even though the altar was cracked in half. Rayhan was forced not to run any further, and the demon, screamed at him, sorcerer! Basically, it wanted released from its bind, its service. It seemed to be held in thrall by what he assumed was Rayhan, even though Ramalzi had opened the scroll. It asked, have I proved my worth? And it wanted to be released, and Rayhan did not release it. Rayhan was looking over Ramalzi like, what the hell do I do here? I've never, dealt with demons before. But Rayhan, commanded it to go back to whence it came, so it might show up at a later date. So this is when we sort of realized, out of character, that all of Ramalzi's items and property were taken away from him when he jumped into the portal. So he was no longer bound to the evil black book where he had to sacrifice souls to it. He was allowed his skull, the platter, and the old wizard's spirit guide that were trapped in it. They gave him one of the old man's robes and the old man's stuff. So he does have things now, just different things. And I need to go over that with Jeremiah when we start, what he actually has. There was also a journal, which was kind of funny. They didn't think the old man could read it, but he had a journal. They collected up the treasure of the three men, Ronald and William and the old man. There was an ivory hippo statue and several statues of Saint MacIver, that is a saint of the Church of the All, which the town worships. And there was also gold and silver. Ramalzi was trying to come to grips with who he was, who he is, and who he shall become. The memories of the past were almost all gone. Ramalzi's only memories are when he first entered the midwifery and then down into the sewers. The rest has all been cut away by the torture of years. The group mentioned the possible threat of 2 growing portals, one underneath the dragon turtle and the one in the sarcophagus room, and the fact that they might intersect with each other eventually. And they thought that was probably a bad thing, but they weren't really sure. And they weren't sure as well as would they continue to grow. So that's something that they don't know. They might go back down to check it out later if, things don't end or get interesting before then. Mallow, the priest, wanted to talk to Ramelzi about this place of torture, which he thinks may be the afterlife of his gods Penthos and Vex. So he's very interested. You've actually been to the afterlife and come back. You've been in the place where my gods dwell. So he was very interested in hearing about that. The group was very also unsure of themselves because, again, they had heard that these rumors of a princess down here, with the dragon turtle, but they never saw her, and if she was down there, she's probably dead now. So they're like, oh, whoops, sorry about that, kind of forgot about that part. So some perhaps Flame Princess was trapped with the turtle and now has met with a grisly end. Oh well. So the group finished up in the inn, and they went to sleep, and they were absolutely exhausted and glad to be alive. All right, everyone, that's today's summary. Again, it's pretty long-winded, but that's how these roll. All right, I'll talk to you guys later.